Hello, I'm Sachi Inari Rizzo, curator of prints and drawings at the Fort Wayne Museum of Art. Every other month, I've been presenting an in-depth discussion of a topic related to the museum's collection of works on paper. These coincide with exhibitions in the Print and Drawing Study Center that highlight themes found across the Fort Wayne Museum of Art's collection. The current exhibition in the Print and Drawing Study Center is called The Mexican Portfolios, focusing on two bodies of work approaching the subject of Mexico. They include the Mexican Portfolio by American photographer Paul Strand and a group portfolio entitled Mexican People by Mexican Print Collective. Paul Strand was one of photography's most important advocates in the early 20th century as a creative art form. He made two trips to Mexico, one in 1932 to 34 and another in 1966. This resulted in 234 photographic negatives and 114 prints. He selected 20 images from his first stay in the 1930s, consisting of views of the landscape, architecture, religious sculpture, and people. These were printed as photogravures in 1940 and was titled Photographs of Mexico. It was reissued in 1967 under the title The Mexican Portfolio, which is what we own. The Mexican People Portfolio is from 1946 and was printed by the Taller de Gráfica Popular, or TGP for short, and meaning the People's Graphic Arts Workshop. It is a group portfolio that includes 12 lithographs by 10 different members of the collective. The portfolio features work scenes that promoted the natural resources, products, and workers from different regions of Mexico. Commissioned by the Council of Pan-American Democracy, the portfolio was directed at a U.S. audience intending to promote products for export. It was created in collaboration with Associated American Artists, a New York-based gallery that published affordably priced original works of art geared towards the middle class. The gallery supported the project by contributing $1,000 per month from January through August 1946, allowing artists to travel to various regions in Mexico. Paul Strand's trip to Mexico was through an invitation of his friend, the acclaimed composer Carlos Chavez. Chavez had been appointed the director of the Department of Fine Arts of the Mexican government's Secretariat of Public Education. During the opening decades of the 20th century, visual artists, composers, writers, filmmakers, and dancers from all around the world flocked to Mexico to experience its cultural renaissance. It was a host to exciting and progressive cultural reforms being implemented by the post-revolution government. The trip was timely. Strand had been having problems with his marriage and his friend and mentor, Alfred Stieglitz. And this is a comparison between two works, one by Alfred Stieglitz and one by Paul Strand. Before we look more at Strand's photographs from his trip to Mexico, let's look at his earlier work. His photograph of Wall Street on the right is a marked departure from late 19th century pictorialism, seen in a Parisian street scene by Alfred Stieglitz on the left. Pictorialist photographers sought wider acceptance of the medium by creating highly individual, very expressive prints. They were dependent on labor-intensive processes that revealed the hand of the artist and brought out painterly qualities for soft-focus impressionistic images. Sadakichi Hartman, who often wrote for Stieglitz's journal Camera Work, complained, "We expect an etching to look like an etching and a lithograph to look like a lithograph. Why then should not a photograph print look like a photographic print?" In contrast, Strand's Wall Street is made up of crisp lines and simple geometric shapes. Even the shadows of the figures walking form an interesting pattern of elongated shapes. Strand was a champion of straight photography, essentially photography without technical manipulation or visible handwork. The approach embraced the medium's inherent strengths of sharp focus and richness in detail and tone. Strand photographed plant life and especially city streets, excited by the movement of modern life, the people, and machines. His photos were characterized by a clarity in design and a predilection for geometric forms. This objectivity didn't mean he was a social realist, though. Although an outsider and a foreigner in Mexico, Strand sought to document what he perceived to be the character and essence of the country. Through government-sponsored projects, he received help from interpreters and possibly received a more favorable response than without official support. Strand departed from the formalistic approach of straight photography for this body of work to a long, in-depth study of the people and the land. This approach would stay with him for the remainder of his life. His photographs were well received in Mexico. Muralist David Alfaro Siqueiros called Strand an American Mexican, and fellow artist Miguel Covarrubias said that the Mexican portfolio was the finest job of reproduction of the finest photographs ever made of Mexico. The first photograph he selected for the portfolio is a landscape near Saltillo, and the only one dated to 1932. The others are from 1933. It is a landscape and includes a white adobe structure far away in the distance, framed by trees and cactus plants. This gives the viewer a sense of Strand's experience upon entering the country as he made his way south to Mexico City. Strand spent more of his time in rural villages and the states surrounding the capital city, choosing to depict the timelessness in Mexico. Like any photograph, his work did not capture the whole reality and its complexity. Mexico's first skyscraper was built in 1932, the year of Strand's arrival, and yet amid our images of urban life, industrialization and technology, and the polar contrasts of poverty and wealth. Strand's Mexican portfolio was shot with a camera but printed as photogravures, which were commonly printed in books from 1890 to 1930, accompanied by text and letterpress. Because of photogravures' rich tonal quality and sharp detail, they were often used to reproduce paintings and photographs. Photogravure is still used today by fine art photographers to make prints. The process was invented in 1852. Similar to the printmaking technique aquatint, a copper plate is dusted and heated with resin, a granular material. A light-sensitive gelatin or carbon tissue is exposed through an image bearing positive transparency and is rinsed. The exposed carbon tissue is placed on the copper plate and is coated with the aquatint ground. The gelatin acts like a resist, providing varying levels of protection to the plate when immersed in an acid bath. The acid bites into the plate around the aquatint grains, unprotected by the gelatin. For example, the acid penetrates the most in the dark areas of the image where the gelatin is thin. Before printing, the aquatint ground and gelatin are removed from the plate, leaving the etched image. The plate is inked and run through an intaglio printing press. Being made up of 20 works, the portfolio format allowed a way to show the development of ideas, like a book. The photographers oversaw the printing, and these fine prints were high quality. Strand shows a beautiful progression of images through the portfolio. As we enter further into the portfolio, we move from the natural landscape to the man-made environment in the form of a grand arched gateway that is used as a framing device. The arch opens up to a plaza and the entrance to the church. The decorative curves of the gate stand out in the bright light. Architecture is strategically placed in the beginning, middle, and the end of the series. Both the landscape and architecture provide a setting for the remaining photos, making up the body of the portfolio, which are close-ups of devotional sculpture from church interiors and porches of villagers. Strand cropped out the details of the elaborate interior spaces of the churches and centered on the carved figures to draw attention to their strength in craftsmanship and symbolic meaning. These two images, similar in pose, were intentionally placed in succession in the portfolio. Their juxtaposition helps to augment elements with each other. The suffering Christ figure can be compared with the villager who may have experienced hardship. Strand, on his photography, stated, "I like to photograph people who have strength and dignity in their faces. Whatever life has done to them, it hasn't destroyed them. I gravitate towards people like that." His camera choice for interiors of churches and details of religious art with natural light was an 8x10 Corona. He often used a small aperture setting with exposure time exceeding an hour. Strand's photographs of Mexican people are highly detailed and feel very natural and unposed, as the individuals look relaxed and not at all self-conscious even when caught looking into the camera. The work by the Scottish partnering photographers David Octavius Hill and Robert Adamson were likely influenced. An example of their work is seen on the right. Their series of photographs documenting daily life in a fishing towns outside of Edinburgh, Scotland, come to mind. Strand admired how they captured the strength and dignity of their sitters without sentimentality. For his street photography from 1916, Strand added a false lens to his camera that was directed in front of him. This allowed him to surreptitiously shoot photos at a 90-degree angle to the side, partially concealed by his arm. In Mexico, Strand often turned to his Graflex camera for speed and portability. It had a prism in the lens extension, which enabled him to experiment with photo compositions from varying angles. Strand's contemporaries Brassai, Walker Evans, Louis Hine, and Andre Kertész also shot photos without their subject's knowledge. Using a hidden lens to get more candid photos without the subject's permission might be called into question today, especially if they are of vulnerable populations. Strand explained in the 19-teens, "I always felt that my relationship to photography and people was serious, and that I was attempting to give something to the world and not exploit anyone in the process." Photography's nature is to provide us with detail and information to individualize people, their clothing, and places. Strand, however, did not talk with his subjects, and individuals' names were not included in the titles, just generalized descriptions with locations. All three photos here were taken in Hidalgo. Similarly, these prints from the Mexican People portfolio dealt with the working people in Hidalgo. The artists did not tend to individualize their subjects either. The emphasis was more about work. People are often shown from behind, at a distance, or with little characterization in their faces. Composition and style are straightforward and easily readable by the masses. The Mexican People portfolio was created by members of the People's Graphic Arts Workshop, which was a graphic arts collective founded in Mexico City in 1937. Founding members included Raul Angiano, Luis Arenal, Leopoldo Mendez, and Pablo O'Higgins. Not long after, Ángel Baracho and Alfredo Zalce joined. Members used prints and posters to educate, support progressive causes, and promote social reform that would benefit the interests of the Mexican people. Collaboration took the form of discussing projects and concepts as a group, or dividing up work on prints. One member might be the designer, another creating the block or stone, and another the printer. The title page of the portfolio is a map of Mexico. The small drawings and lithograph connect to activities and work associated with the different regions that are explored in the prints. Leopoldo Mendez was regarded often as a leader of the TGP. The title, and that's the Taller Gráfica Popular, the print collective. The title of this lithograph from the Mexican People portfolio is Grinding Maize. In the foreground, a woman is at work over a rectangular slab with legs, known as a metate, an ancient Mesoamerican tool made of basalt stone. Traditionally, a woman crushes grain by moving a rounded handheld stone back and forth across the metate. While work is the subject, Mendez's figures are proportionately small, and instead our attention is drawn to the row of large thatched roof structures used to preserve maize. The corn granary was distinctive throughout the Morelos region in Mexico, but has since grown unpopular. The storage area is reminiscent of a large vessel set on circular stone foundation. On the map, a line connects the drawing of the granary with this part of the country. The map also shows how the structure is used. Corn kernels are poured in an opening in the roof, accessible through ladders. When needed, the corn can be collected through a hole closer to the base, as seen in Mendez's print on the left. Early use of this type of storage is documented in the Hueco Codex of 1531. A stylized thatched structure is drawn in the upper left corner. It is fitting that the artist focused on a traditional indigenous household tool and architectural form. After the Mexican Revolution, which ended in 1920, the newly elected president sought to bring together the diverse Mexican people of Native and European descent. They promoted a new national identity with a unified history that embraced and elevated indigenous civilizations, including the Olmec, Maya, and Aztec. In the years preceding the Mexican Revolution, the country's society privileged European culture. Discoveries of pre-Columbian archaeological sites further fueled enthusiasm. Mexicanidad cultivated pride in Mexico's indigenous cultures and by doing so was offsetting centuries of Spanish supremacy and suppression. Mendes's granaries are impressive due to their large scale. He captures our interest through his rich range of tones and varied treatment of lines to describe the thick layers of straw for the diversely shaped roofs. Perhaps the enormity of the granaries remind us that the grinding of maize is only one element of the entire process. The three workers lead our eye back through the composition. One worker's identity is concealed by the burdensome bundle of corn stalks carried. Corn stored in the granary can last for months and potentially up to 1 year, speaking to its importance as a food source. Ángel Borracho probably had the longest history with the TGP, from 1937 to his death in 2005. While the prints of the portfolio include images of people, they are largely focused on the work or the type of work being done in the region. Instead, Borracho created a body of work focusing on the indigenous Huichol people, who were able to retain many of their traditions and way of life. Borracho lived with the indigenous Huichol tribe in the Sierra Madre Occidental mountain range during the early 1940s. Fernando Castro Pacheco looked at the valleys of the state of Hidalgo and is showing us the processing of the plant Istla, or a maguey, a type of agave. It is key to the population's existence. The extracted pulp is combined with maize and is an important source of food. The fiber from leaves is used to weave fabric and rope. According to the portfolio's commentary, this region was one of the most impoverished in Mexico. In Pacheco's print, we see a mother and child resting in a very simply constructed shelter in what looks to be an arid environment. A spinning wheel is off to the left. The woman in the foreground works with the plant's fiber. To get it to this plant, the leaves had to be pounded, extracting the fibers, and dried. Columns of smoke dominate Raul Angiano's print, entitled Lime Kilns. Lime is the mineral used to make cement and concrete. It is also used in plaster and to soften maize to make dough. Archaeologists working in Mexico have discovered that lime kilns were used in Mesoamerican communities dating to possibly 1000 BCE. Angiano shows the rigorous manual labor required to burn limestone or chalk in these pit-like kilns located in Tula de Allende. The workers are small in stature compared to the boulders in the kilns. The portfolio's accompanying text discusses the importance of lime in the Hidalgo region, but also mentions the adverse health hazards that go along with the meager salaries. Francisco Moro's print is a social critique, as he is concerned with the plight of the people working in the silver mines, also in the state of Hidalgo. His involvement with the TGP taught him about how art can be a catalyst for social and political change. He became a member of the TGP in 1941 and was active through 1965. Mora pursued mining as a subject in 1945 after being commissioned to create a print series on that topic. He and fellow artist Pacheco traveled to observe miners at work. Mora's portfolio, entitled Las Mañanas, recorded the long days, labor conditions, and intense life of workers in relief prints. Mexico is rich with silver deposits and have been a foreign interest since the 16th century. The mining industry, mostly foreign-owned, accounted for 36% of Mexico's exports in the 1940s. While the Mexican People portfolio is overall positive in outlook, Mora took the opportunity to reveal the exploitive labor conditions and the dangers of silver mining. The tunnels were tight with inadequate ventilation and drainage. There was always a risk of tunnels collapsing. In Mora's lithograph, a miner with a tired, grim look on his face walks hunched over, attesting to the low height of the dark, claustrophobic passageway. In an earlier print by the artist, the working space was so confined that his miner was forced to crawl on his stomach. Here, the miner wears a helmet, but is shirtless and only wears shorts and sandals, which seem insufficient for the job. Alberto Bertrand shows us the group effort involved in grinding sugarcane. Two men on the left trim and prepare the cane. The worker in the foreground feeds sugarcane in between the rotating vertical rollers that crush it and extract the juice that pours off. The juice can be boiled to evaporate the liquid, which concentrates the sugar. The seated worker is muscular and robust in form. He has a monumental presence as he rises up in front of us. He is depicted larger than even the horse that provides the power that powers the rollers. Pablo O'Higgins was born in the U.S. After reading an article on Diego Rivera in an art magazine, he sought to study with the muralist in 1924. Subsequently, O'Higgins assisted Rivera with several major mural projects. The artist provided invaluable connections with American artists and helped with exhibition opportunities in the U.S. O'Higgins revealed the intergenerational nature of brickmaking. An older worker on the left and a young boy helps to stack fired bricks. They labor in front of a brick structure. O'Higgins contributed 2 prints to the portfolio. His figures are characterized by rhythmic, undulating contour lines. The subject of Isidoro Ocampos's work is the Regent's pottery seen in all the vases, bowls, and pots that line the shelves on the walls and the floor. The central figure is exaggerated and attenuated in height. He is made up of curving lines like the large handled bowls behind him. I didn't notice at first that he stands in clay, kneading the clay with his feet to prepare its use. In this print on the left, Arturo Garcia Bustos depicts an agricultural system that was used in villages in the Federal District. We see workers harvesting fresh produce from the water. Early Mesoamerican communities built what is called chinapa. The Aztecs created small floating islands of fertile land to grow crops in shallow bodies of water in the valley. These floating gardens were made up of interwoven reeds, grasses, and rushes, like a fence structure, but underwater. The fences were covered and built up with enough soil and vegetation that a layer is above the water surface. The technique takes advantage of the nutrient-rich sediment. Today, some chinapas have been designated as a UNESCO World Heritage Site and are seen as a viable, sustainable farming practice. Alfredo Salce contributed 2 prints to the portfolio. The lumber workers on the left is one of 2 color prints in the series. Mahogany wood is brought from Chiapas by way of the river. The worker in the foreground is heroic in size with broad shoulders and long arms. The colors of his arms and legs blend into the series of logs that are tethered together and plunge back at a dramatic angle. The laborer ably handles the massive 2-person cross-cut saw to cut the ends of the logs and make them uniform in size. Others work in waist-high water, which must be exhausting, with the water's current and exposure to the sun. On the right is a small drawing on the map focusing on the 2 workers sawing the logs while in the water. In Salce's second print, the subject is henequen, a native plant to the Yucatan Peninsula. Its use dates back to the Maya civilization. It has been used to make rope and sacks after the juice is extracted. There has been a decline in demand with the rise of synthetic fibers, though. The juice can also be made into a liquor like tequila. Its long tapering leaves are cut near the stem. At the mill, the leaves are shredded. We get a sense of the large scale of the leaves in the print and photograph. Apparently, they can reach 4 to 5 feet long. Thank you for joining me today, and please stop by the Print and Drawing Study Center to see these works in person, plus the rest of the works in the portfolios. I will be back here on Wednesday, March 12th, to discuss the exhibition Expressionism and Spirituality in the Print and Drawing Study Center. We will look at artists including Max Beckmann, Georges Rouault, Laterio Calapai, and Art Sislo, who use an expressionistic style to add dramatic power to religious and spiritual themes in their works.